Dolph Paulsen. I'm a master's student in speech-language pathology at the MGH Institute of Health Professions in Charlestown, right here in town. And this is my presentation, A Sound Bridge to the Text, or how an ancient discipline can motivate today's students who struggle with reading comprehension. The 2011 National Assessment of Educational Progress reported that 1/3 of fourth grade students read at a below basic level. This whole bar represents the 67% of fourth grade students scoring at basic or above. Only 8% of students read at an advanced level. The 33% below basic are not in this picture. In the brand new April issue of Language, Speech, and Hearing Services in Schools, editor Marilyn A. Napold calls for the implementation of systematic and explicit language intervention for reading comprehension. These past few months, as part of my reading specialist practicum, I have been developing a program with that same goal. In third and fourth grade, we expect students to start learning from independent reading. How can we better prepare these students for such demands? How can we make complex language motivating for them? Has written language always been more complex than spoken? Once upon a time, one could not create 1 million copies of a pamphlet at the Staples around the corner by 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Ancient Greece and Rome. In the West, we consider these civilizations the bedrock of modern intellect. Yet in those times, ideas were transmitted chiefly through the human voice. Thinkers of the old world used rhetoric to get their points across. Aristotle wrote his volume, which we now call Aristotle's Rhetoric, 2,400 years ago. Equally important to us are Plato's accounts of the teachings of Socrates, which emphasize the danger of structured, elevated language. In the 17th and 18th centuries, scholars in the English-speaking world standardized rules of grammar and usage for the sake of consistency and objectivity, primarily in the sciences. They used Latin as their model. Classical rhetoric came to permeate theater, science, education, and politics. In the centuries that followed, the figures of rhetoric worked their way into our collective linguistic consciousness. However, as we transitioned from an oral language culture to one dominated by text, rhetoric, as an invigorating way of receiving and expressing thought, became subsumed in words that cannot speak for themselves. We can use rhetoric to provide child-friendly literacy education by reviving the melodies of our language that time has reduced to a faint series of echoes. Here's how. Numerous studies have found a relationship between expressive oral reading prosody and higher reading comprehension scores. This is a very incomplete list. Expressive oral reading prosody means reading a text out loud with phrasing and pitch contours that approximate the sound of natural speech. And since the evidence shows that expressive readers comprehend better, people are now looking for methods to help struggling students achieve prosodic oral reading. So far, studies have investigated methods like repeated oral readings, reading along while listening to an expert model, and reading and moving and rhythm to music. These methods and a handful of others have demonstrated positive outcomes for fluency, prosody, and comprehension, but there does not yet appear to be a method that teaches the specific patterns of prosody as they are coded into written language. Before speech-language pathology, theater was my life. I earned a Master's of Fine Arts in acting. I studied with some of the greatest teachers in the United States and England, but it was in one experimental class in my undergraduate days at UMass Amherst that I learned the power of rhetoric from this man, Milan Dragicevic, a new professor that year. In his course, Performance in Detonated Language, we learned to ignite the explosive power of complex text. We read examples of rhetorical devices from playwrights as different from each other as Shakespeare and David Flipping Mamet. We put the knowledge that we got from that into monologues and scenes. We wrote our own examples and read them out loud. I learned rhetoric to better help a live audience understand complex language, but the effect it had on me was far greater than the augmentation of a theatrical skill set. It forever energized the sound of text inside my head. What I've done in developing a sound bridge to the text is I've stolen what I learned from a professor who adapted his own curriculum from antiquity and translated it into language that speaks to today's children. Chiasmus is one of the most easily recognizable rhetorical devices. Chi is the Greek letter X, and chiasmus means X-shaped pattern. You take the two most important words in the first part, and then in the second, you flip them. Ask not what your country can do for you. This structure is already captivating to us, but we can make it even more arresting to the mind if we use a change in tempo or quality to draw added attention to the reversal. Listen to what these guys do.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We didn't land on Sandwood Forest. Sandwood Forest landed on us.
Useful examples to be sure, but to get students at the 4th grade level to own the structure itself, I give them ones like, the evil queen tried to trap her fart under her fancy dress, but her fancy dress trapped the evil queen under her own fart. You might not love this example, but these students are having a ball while internalizing an understanding of complex language. Parenthesis is something that most of us only ever encounter in formal writing instruction, but it is an organic characteristic of the way we speak. You might be telling a story when all of a sudden you realize that your audience needs some additional details outside of the sentence you're in the middle of. You alter your voice midstream as you include those extra details and then go right back to your story. Billy the Kid, the meanest, dirtiest robber in the Wild West, loved to square dance. We all learn better when we're having fun. Hypophora is something used by trial lawyers all the time in opening and closing statements. Why did I drink all the soda in the refrigerator? You don't like soda. Why did I have to drink it all in one night? Nobody likes flat soda, and soda goes flat much faster in those big plastic bottles. Do I worry about burping loudly in public? I'm 9 years old. I took all of the text from the examples that I use in these 3 lessons with the kids, and I put them in one block of text and put them into a Fry graph calculator. A Fry graph calculator plots average number of syllables per 100 words against average number of sentences per 100 words. These 3 lessons have some of the shortest sentences in all of the material that I've developed for this program so far. So for these 3 lessons, the text that these kids are reading falls at a 5th grade level, according to the Fry graph. Yet these are 3rd and 4th grade students scoring well below the national average in reading comprehension. Not only do they read these with expression and clarity, they also write and generate their own examples at the same level of complexity. So this was originally intended to just be a literature review, and I was going to be developing this program a priori, hypothetically. But in my reading specialist practicum this semester, I did 1 lesson for my supervisor on the concept of antithesis. She went straight to the principal, and I wound up with 23 struggling readers to experiment on. So, what I've seen work in teaching these kids are all things that the foremost educational and developmental theorists have emphasized for decades. Scaffolding. The student grows through guidance in material that is just out of his independent reach. Multimodal education, a variety of opportunities for receptive as well as expressive interaction with content, and connecting the new learning to the worldview of the individual. I'd like to close with an example from my lesson on anadiplosis, which means connecting sentences by using the end of one as the beginning of the next. When I read the words, the page talks to me. When the page talks to me, I listen. When I listen, I imagine. When I imagine, I see whatever I want to see. So far, this program is evidence-supported. Let's make it evidence-based. Let's build a sound bridge to the text.
Thank you. Yes. So is your name Randolph?
Yes, but you can call me Dolph.
Okay. Thanks for your presentation. I just had a quick question regarding, I think your program is very interesting in the idea of teaching structures of rhetoric to really young kids. And I'm just wondering how you would see the link between that and getting kids to understand the complex syntax of just regular expository writing, science, history, which is not necessarily historical, not rhetorical. Anyway.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's a very good question. It's one that other people have asked me as well. What I have found is that, and a lot of these other studies that I cite that have sought to improve oral reading prosody, through repeated readings or any method, is that prosody generalizes to novel texts. So it's more the teaching of a skill that can actually translate to any piece of text. So I do have kids, I have them, pull books from the library. I always make sure that they're nonfiction. And then, for certain lessons, I just have them, I say, find a page and let's read it and let's pick it apart. Let's find what we can do to read it more dynamically out loud. And that's what I do to target comprehension. And actually, I do find in looking at a lot of grade school texts that there are rhetorical devices embedded within them. And this was a sample of, I sampled 4 in this, but I teach about 12 of the most accessible ones within the course. So like hypothera shows up a lot of times in science texts for grade school, which begin with a question like, did you know that our sun is actually a star? And then the answer comes, all from the same person. So it's sort of, a lot of these texts are actually written with strategies that are designed to get kids' attention. But if they don't know how to make them sound interesting in their head, then it's much harder for them to get into the meat of it. I hope that answers your question.
These are experiences when he's writing. So I guess improving students' reading audience awareness could probably have an impact on reading once students are taught or scaffolded regarding how to better understand the writer's intentions and how why he or she was moving, making certain moves. And actually, we know students develop reading audience awareness in grade 1. I feel like probably the kids you work with have a certain level of audience awareness, either in reading or writing, and you could probably capitalize on that.
A lot of the examples I use with them are sort of written from the first person, and I teach Socratically all the time, so I'm trying to get them to analyze the piece that they're given and say, who is speaking and who might this be spoken to. So, audience awareness does come into that, not just, sort of basic reading comprehension, what's the content here, what's the message, but, also what, what's not being said here that, and whom is this intended for, and, where do you get that evidence from? So, I see the connection, absolutely.
I think we'll take one more minute, and I want to ask you, panelists, whether there were any resonances that really struck you as you were listening to your colleagues that would be exciting to be pursuing conversations after this panel.
A lot. I think anything, especially related to argumentation, because rhetoric comes, at least as far as it's thought of today, it's taught, the places where it is explicitly taught are in debate and in law school. People learn these things as argumentative strategies. So anything related to debate, argumentation, which is pretty much everybody here, I think that that's all really important. I think, you know, Miriam's presentation on the sort of that really targets the continuum from oral language to written is really important, because I do see that as one continuum. And I think that it's, you know, especially in grade schools, at least as far in this country as I've seen, I haven't traveled to Morocco, but the reading specialists and speech language pathologists, as far as the special educators go, they sort of, I mean, they all too often exist in separate silos that never really interact.
But I want to thank you. I myself found all of the presentations really interesting. Saw all kinds of presentations. I do want to say that I was very impressed with the structure of all the presentations. And I also was very heartened because I think that augmentation skills and dispositions are so very important in this age, and it's really exciting to see the police officers come together in the classroom work. So keep on doing work. Thank you very much. Feel free to grab anybody and